So, kind of a question to start. How many people watched the Olympics this year? Just curious. Yes, a number of you. It's interesting. I don't normally watch the Olympics that much. I have nothing against it. It's just the way that historically it's been covered. I just didn't really get a chance to watch it much. But this year, I actually got a chance to watch it a lot because NBC covered it a little bit differently. I mean, they still had kind of that primetime coverage that they have. But they did something I thought was pretty neat. Is what they did is for a large number of the games and matches, they actually created these really short versions of the game, kind of the short attention span version of the events. So that there was anywhere between like a 90-second and 10-minute version of entire events, which kind of fits my attention span anyway. But what was interesting about it is that they put them all out on YouTube. And so it was kind of neat that like when I would be kind of doing cardio or something in the morning, I could throw the videos on. I could watch 3 or 4 events while that was going on. And it was kind of neat because it exposed me to things that I don't normally watch very much. Some of the track and field stuff I wouldn't normally have watched, but it was neat seeing, in 2 cases, in the hurdles events, people break world records. It's kind of neat to watch that. And things that I don't really know much about, pole vaulting and so forth, what I found is that whenever you're watching someone who's really good at something, even if you're not into what they're doing, there's something just powerful about watching people who have perfected something that they're doing. And so even these sports that I wasn't that into, I found really interesting. But then what I found is that as I watched other sports that I do, like for example, I've been into volleyball for decades. I'm not old, decades. And back when I lived in New York City, I played in a volleyball league, and I knew it was a big volleyball league, but I didn't know until later it was actually the largest volleyball league in the country. And it literally had thousands of people in this league. And, I wasn't great, but I wasn't terrible. So I was kind of in the middle there somewhere. So I got to watch a lot of different people play. And some of the people who were in the higher leagues were just incredible how effective they were. And something that I experienced is that if you're doing something you like doing, and you watch people who do the same thing, but are better than you, you can actually start to learn a lot by watching them. Because as they pull off moves and shots that you could never imagine, yes, you may never reach their level of performance, but you can see techniques and things that they're doing that to help you do what you would like to do better. Now, for sports, that's kind of nice and that's kind of neat. But imagine if we had that for life. If in our lives we could actually look at people who had done their lives well and say that, wow, they did well because they did this or they did that. And we start to apply that same thing to our own lives. We can actually begin to improve step by step by watching people who have done life well. As we go through this series with Nehemiah, there is something that Nehemiah did really, really well. Right? Nehemiah lived his life well. He lived an impactful life. And he didn't live an impactful life that was centered on himself. He lived an impactful life that was centered on meeting the needs of other people. And by caring for other people and looking at the challenges that other people faced and being willing to step into those challenges, he impacted their lives, and it also impacted his own life. And I think that's the biggest thing that we can see as we look at the life of Nehemiah. Now, Nehemiah is kind of an interesting character. He actually lived over 2,000 years ago, as we talked about 2,500 years ago. And as you remember, he was part of the exiles from Israel. So at some point, Israel had been a free nation, had been conquered, the people were exiled. And remember that during his lifetime, people were being allowed to move back to where they had come from. And although that was meant to be a joyous event, it wasn't going well. And a big factor in that was the fact that the wall that went around the city was deeply damaged. But again, this wasn't about a wall. It was about the fact that in the ancient world, cities had to be secure. The key part of the security was the wall. So as long as that wall wasn't intact, the people could not live full lives. And Nehemiah understood that. And so Nehemiah wanted to step in to that problem and help them. And the thing that we've seen week after week in this series is that Nehemiah continually overcomes incredible circumstances, starting out as a servant and then using his position as a servant to get resources and opportunity. And then as he gets to the region where he's trying to repair the wall, as opposition rose up, he continued to overcome it. And he did that week after week. And so as we join in with Nehemiah again this week, remember as we left him last week, they were working on the wall and they were experiencing some challenges. As we meet up with him this week, he's done what was actually almost considered impossible. He'd actually completed the work on the wall. He had achieved what he set out to do. But because Nehemiah is a smart man, and because Nehemiah is not concerned about a wall was just a tool. What he was concerned about was people. As he got there and he looked around at the people, he realized that their pain and their suffering was much deeper than simply the security of the city. So what he realized is that there is deep hurt going on. And that if he's going to really make a difference here, he needs to take additional steps to restore these people, to help them experience healing. So this week, as we continue our series, Repairing What's Broken, I want to talk about healing what hurts. Because again, Nehemiah was focused on people, and these people were hurting. And what Nehemiah recognized, as he looked around at the people who were in the city, that they had become deeply beaten down because they were missing out on two things that all of us need to have in our lives. He recognized that these people, if they were going to heal, they first need to recognize that they're valuable. The reality is that if we go through life never feeling valuable, that's going to beat us down. And so what needs to happen is that we all need to feel like we're contributing to something that matters. And these people had lost that. What it comes down to is that we all need to feel that we're an important part of something that's important. If we don't, our lives can start to feel aimless. But he also understood that feeling valuable was only one piece of the puzzle. The other thing is people need to feel valued. They need to feel like someone cares about them, feel like someone loves them, feel like they are important to someone. So we all need to feel like we're an important part of something important. We all need to feel like we're important to someone. Because if we don't do that, that's when life starts to feel empty and aimless and pointless. And that's when depression, I think, starts to kick in. That's when we start to exhibit self-destructive behavior. And this is what the people in that region were living with day after day. And in fact, it wasn't actually just day after day. It had gone from day after day to year after year to decade after decade, generation after generation. The people in that region had come to feel beaten down, that we were not valuable and were not valued. And just to kind of set the stage for how long they had been experiencing this, I want to just kind of quickly go through the timeline of what these generations had gone through. So if we go back and we look at the timeline of the exiles, it's important to remember that Israel had been a free nation. Now at that time it was called Judah, but it's what we now know as Israel. So Israel had been a free nation, self-governing and independent. But then that changed. In 587 BC, the Babylonians come rolling in and just crush them. Tear down the wall, tear up the city, and most importantly, leveled the temple. That temple was the center of their lives. It was the center of their faith. It was the center of their culture. It was everything. And that was all taken away. And then, as we've talked about before, to assure that they don't rise up in revolution, the king then takes all the people from the region and spreads them out through the countryside so they can't congregate together. So now they've lost everything that's important to them, and they're moved away from the land that they know and the people that they know. And that went on for a long time. But then finally, about 50 years later, there's a new king. Now, Israel is still a conquered nation. There's just a new king in charge. And this king decides that it's okay to let some of the people move back. He allows a few thousand people to move back. Great joy, except when they get there, the city is still demolished, the wall's still torn apart, and there's still no temple. So their hopes were raised and then dropped. So they decide they want to do something about that. So they actually go to the king and say, hey, can we build another temple? And he says yes. So 2 years later, they start building another temple. The work on the temple begins. We're going to be fine. Except it took 20 years to build the temple. So it was 20 years later before that temple was finished. A lot of reasons behind that, a lot of opposition. They had to pause for a while. But fundamentally, there are people who were alive when that work started who didn't live to see it finished. And that went on. And then, once the temple's done, we're going to be good, right? Well, not quite. Turns out that just having a temple wasn't enough. So more time goes by. And then finally, 458 BC, there is yet another king who says that more exiles can go back. In fact, where the first king said a few thousand of you can go back, this king says that anyone who wants to go back can. This is fantastic. We can go back. And this time, we're going to follow a guy that's going to help us, a guy named Ezra. Ezra was a priest that leads them in. Now, if you recognize that name, it's because there is a book in the Old Testament called the Book of Ezra. Same guy. So if you look at the last 4 chapters of Ezra, he describes that trip as they go back. And they're excited, and it's all going to get better again. Except it doesn't. And a bunch more years go by. And about 13 years later is when we met Nehemiah. So Nehemiah was alive when that group of exiles led by Ezra returned, and he knew about the excitement that was coming up and all the hope that was going on. But remember when we met Ezra in the very first part of the series? What motivated him? Things weren't any better. People were still beaten down. And that's what motivated him to step out and do something. So that's when he did all the things we've talked about. Talked to the king, got the resources, headed to the wall, and started work on it. And then he does that the following year, in 444 BC. And that's where he was when we left him last week. So now as he does the work on the wall, he knows that it's so important to start to give these people hope. It's so important to make sure that these people have something to believe in and see that something can actually get better. Now, he knew they needed security. That was his original motivation. But he now understands they need much more than that they need that sense of being valuable. And he knows one of the best ways to help them get there is to give them a win, a big win. And finishing this wall would be a big win. And being sure that everyone who worked on the wall was alive to see it finished. So he focused and he got things done. And it turns out that he finished the wall faster than anyone could imagine. After decades and decades of hoping for things to get better, he gets it done. How fast did he get it done? He tells us. On October 2nd, the wall was finished. Just 52 days after we'd begun. So they had tried for decades to begin to change things. And in less than 2 months, he gives them this huge win. And he starts to bring change to the region. Now, first of all, he had to be focused to do this. That's the only way he could have gotten the win this quickly, is that he actually understood that there are important things going on, and he kept it going. So all the things that we've seen Nehemiah do the past 3 weeks are critical to how this work got done so fast. We know that he was connected to God in prayer. We know he laid out a plan. We know that he stepped out boldly to get the things that he needed. We know that he stood up in the face of opposition. And so through that, he had done in 2 months what people had not been able to do in years. And so, excuse me. And one of the things he did is he always kept the work moving. Remember all that opposition that he had? Because let's think about our own lives. How often do we start out on something that's really, really important to us, and then something else draws our attention away, and we don't get back to it? Or we start and we stop, and we start and we stop. There's a kind of a famous quote from the business world. A sure road to defeat is to allow the urgent to consistently displace the important. The things that pop up and grab your attention, and you take the important and you push it aside because that's the thing that's in front of me right now. Nehemiah didn't do that. He understood that this was important. And it was important for more than just security, although it was important for that. He knew that he had to stay focused on it. And as the leader, people would look to him on how to deal with things. And remember, when people tried to oppose him, and people tried to draw his attention away, and people tried to get him to focus on the things that weren't important. Do you remember what he said? That's how we finished last week. I'm doing a great work, and I am unable to come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you? Now, on the surface, that can sound kind of arrogant. But the idea, he was mission-driven. And he stayed focused on that mission. And he understood that if he let things grab his attention, if he let the urgent take him away, if he let the distractions take him away, what was important wouldn't get done. And so we record this happening once out loud from Nehemiah, but I am certain that Nehemiah said this to himself all the time, that I am doing a great work, and I am unable to come down. And I would encourage you to say the same thing to yourself. When you're working on something important and something starts to draw you away, no, wait, I'm doing a great work. I don't have time to go do that right now, because I'm not going to let the seemingly urgent draw me away from what's important. And he knew, again, as the leader, people would look to him. So he had to recognize that the work that they were doing was valuable, which meant that he had a valuable role in that work. And also what he did is he helped everyone who was involved understand that they had a valuable role in the work. And one of the things that Nehemiah did is he involved the whole community. He recognized that his community had people of different skills and abilities. Some people were leaders. The people who were leaders, he let lead. He empowered them to lead. Some people were deeply skilled with certain kinds of metalworking and so forth. He would make sure that they were the ones who were working on those tasks. But he also knew that some people didn't have those kinds of special skills, but he still got them involved. And if you go through and you look at what everyone did, and it's largely in chapter 3, if you go through and look at what everyone did, there were some people who just repaired one little piece of the wall in front of their house because that's the skill that they had. Other people who were more skilled did much larger tasks. But as all those things came together, everyone doing what they could do, they got this incredible job done in 52 days. And what it also meant is that all of these people had a valuable role in a valuable task. And I think that's the thing that we need to understand, is that as we go through our lives, it's so important to remember that we need to feel like we're doing something that matters, that we need to look around us, and we need to get involved in things that matter to us, big or small. If there's an organization, a big organization that takes care of something that's important to you, go be what you can be inside that organization. Go do that. Or if there's something smaller that really touches you, that if you know that there is a family nearby that's struggling and you can do a little bit to help, that's really, really important. Step out. Do what you can. If you're good at math and you know there's a kid in elementary school who's struggling with his math homework, go help. If you like to read and you know about a kid who's having trouble reading, go help them learn to read. Those are valuable, important jobs. Those are jobs that change lives. Those are jobs that change the future. All of us step out and do what we can. And as we do that, we help the people that we are helping understand that they are valuable. And in doing that, we see that we are doing something valuable, which helps us to recognize that we are valuable. And that's what Nehemiah did for the people throughout that region. But again, he understood that valuable alone wasn't enough. Once he helped people to feel that they were valuable, he then had to help them understand that they are valued, that they are important, to someone, that they are people who matter. And the thing we want to know, the thing we want to kind of recognize is as we deal with people around us, as we engage in our own lives, we all need to feel like someone cares. We all need to know that there is someone who cares about us. Now, as people of faith, we know that God loves us. We know that God values us. But that's not enough for our feelings. Because we can know that God loves us, but if we don't feel like any person cares about us, that's a hard life. So we need to step out. God built us for a community. That God provides what we need, but he built us to connect with other people and engage with other people and support one another and step out and help someone else know that you value them. And we all need that in our own lives as well. And in Nehemiah's case, the people in that region felt anything but valued. That people had been abusing them for decades, literally for generations. The people in power had been crushing these people for years. And when Nehemiah got there, he decided to change that. And the thing is that Nehemiah was in position to change that. Because when the king empowered Nehemiah to go work on the wall, he also gave Nehemiah, beyond resources, he also gave him authority. He actually declared Nehemiah as the governor of the territory, which means that he actually had authority over that region. And as the governor, he could kind of do whatever he wanted. He had the right to tax people. He had the right to tell people what they had to do. He actually had the right, if he wanted to, just kind of, sit up in his house, kick back, do the equivalent of watch TV all day, and let everybody else work. He had that power. But he chose not to do that. Because he decided that rather than make life easy on himself, he was going to care for the people. And what Nehemiah did is that he decided to put people first. He decided not to demand what he was owed as governor. Instead, he chose to lighten the people's burdens, because that was a critical aspect of making this a healthy region, of helping these people to actually start to experience meaningful lives. And Nehemiah tells us the way it was. He says, the former governors had laid heavy burdens on the people, demanding a daily ration of food and wine, plus 40 pieces of silver. Even their assistants took advantage of the people. But because I feared God, I did not act that way. So he's telling us that not only did the people in charge mistreat the people, but they even allowed the people who worked for them to mistreat the people. It was totally a culture of living off the backs of the everyday people, letting a small number of people ride up while everyone else suffered. But Nehemiah did it differently. Nehemiah wanted to make sure that these people feel valued. So he gave up his privileges. He gave up all those things that he was owed to instead invest in the people. Because Nehemiah teaches us something that's really important. We live in a time where everybody's running around screaming about their rights. What about my rights? What about my rights? And Nehemiah said, you know what, I'm not going to worry about my rights so much. I'm going to worry about my responsibilities. I'm in a position to make a difference. I am responsible to do something with that position and make a difference. He recognized that his responsibility was to put people first. And as part of putting people first, he not only changed the way he treated people and those who worked for him treated people, but he looked around and saw this culture of the powerful mistreating the weak. That the wealthy people who lived in the area were loaning money to the people who were poor at interest rates they could never pay, and then taking their land from them when they couldn't pay. They were forcing people to actually sell their children into bondage to pay their bills. And this is their own people, and this is what was going on. And Nehemiah called them on it, and he put a stop to it. And this is something that we all need to take heart. We all need to feel valued, and we all need to help other people feel valued. We all need to step out and do those things. Now, we could just walk up to people and say, hey, you're important to me. And that's a good idea. You've heard me say this before. Bonnie and I tell each other we love each other throughout the day. I already know it, but it's still really nice to hear. Right? But if she told me she loves me, but then did a whole bunch of things that hurt me, or if I told her I love her and I did a whole bunch of things that hurt her, that hurt her. I should have stayed with the first one, sorry. Did a whole bunch of things that hurt her. It would be hard for me to believe those words. So we need to have actions. We need to show people that they're important to us. We need to step out and do that. So we need to be willing to give freely of what we have. We need to be willing to not demand everything that we're owed. We need to be willing to embrace our responsibility to love people. And as followers of Jesus, that is required of us, to love people and share that love with people. And we do that through action and by caring for people. And what Nehemiah shows us is that he was just one person who started out as a servant, but as a servant eventually changed the lives of an entire nation because he took these responsibilities seriously. He started out doing what he could see, which was help them work on the wall. But as he got closer, he saw the problems were bigger. And he continued to invest in the people and continued to care for the people and continued to do what he could do to make things better. And that started to change things. And what Nehemiah shows us is that we all need healing, and there is a consistent path to healing. And that path involves at least two really important steps. So as we walk through the road of healing, the first thing is we all need to know that we are valuable. We all need to be part of something that's important. Because when you're part of something important and you invest yourself in that, you become an important part of something important. No matter what your skills or abilities are. This kind of goes back to where we started. What's that thing that breaks your heart and draws you in? Step into that. And it helps you to see how valuable you are. And we all need to feel valued. That we all need to know that someone cares about us. And we all need to do what we can to help others to know we care about them. And so if we look at these as two abstract ideas, well, how do I know I'm valuable? How do I know I'm valued? And I've mentioned a few things along the way. But it all actually comes down to one thing. The best way to experience both of these things is help other people to experience those things. That if you work to help other people feel valuable, then you're doing something valuable, and you'll recognize it. If you work to help other people feel valued, you start to build that as well for yourself. There's a quote by Zig Ziglar. Some people may know who he is. And he was he's kind of like the original motivational speaker from kind of the late 70s, early 80s. And he used to have this quote, is that you can have everything in life you want if you will help enough people get what they want. Right? This is what we all really want. We want to feel valuable. We want to feel valued. If we will step out and do that for those around us, it changes them, it changes us, and eventually it changes everything. So I'd ask us all to embrace this road and do what we can to walk down it.